Welcome to Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and me, Jim Cunningham.
Jim, hello, Jim.
Come in, Swindon. It's me. How are you? You all right?
I'm good. It's oh boy, we're already up to episode 4. It
Goes
just
so fast.
It does sail by. It really sails by.
Whoops, Johnny. Whoops, Johnny. It just goes.
People are enjoying what they're hearing. They enjoyed Tyler and Star last time. Still getting people who enjoyed Doc Eason, who was fantastic.
Absolutely.
This time we're going to listen to Chapter 4 of The Linking Rings as things continue to evolve there. But also, and first, we are going to revisit a couple ideas from one of our very early guests, the late, the great, the amazing Kreskin. He was so much fun.
Yeah, he really was. Had you ever? I saw him live at one of the casinos here, and it was. I went kind of like, oh yeah, all right, okay, you should go. But it was so entertaining and so absolutely riveting, and so the magic was so good, or the mentalism in this case was so good that it did get to that point where it was like, how is this happening? How is he doing this? So yeah, I really enjoyed him as a performer, and I had kind of when I heard that he passed, I kind of rethought in my mind over that interview and how cool it was that we got a chance to talk to him. And again, in large part, not in large part, in its entirety, ladies and gentlemen, that's due to John.
And that's due to my asking, and it's due to his saying yes. And the thing that we learned about Kreskin is his willingness to say yes. He was extremely enthusiastic about meeting and talking to people. And in this short clip that I pulled out of the whole interview, and if I remember, I'll put a link to the whole interview in the show notes. You can go back and listen to it. He talks about his philosophy about embracing spontaneity, dealing with what's happening in the moment, and then recounts for us something that happened, I think, on the Steve Allen show, which then grew into...
Don't tell him.
All right, I won't tell him what happened. But something happens on the Steve Allen show that
becomes part of our sort of national zeitgeist. Becomes part of our large collective unconscious in this country.
Exactly. So anyway, we're going to launch back into that. I have a kind of a long question, and then you finally get to hear Kreskin talk. Here we go. We talked about laughter and how much fun you have with your audience, how much fun the audience has. I have to tell you, in prepping for this, I went online, looked at a lot of videos of you, and there was 1 or 2 appearances with David Letterman where things didn't quite go right.
That's right.
And I've never seen a performer in you, particularly, who enjoyed the fact that something didn't go right as much as you did then, which is quite different than what you would call a standard mentalist. Wants everything to go right all the time. You're so open to whatever's going to happen.
You have to understand something that's not happening as much in broadcasting anymore. Broadcasting is becoming, the nighttime shows are becoming true program. But you have to understand that that's the key. When there's humor and spontaneity, it is run with the thing. Take advantage of the spontaneity, because that makes it more of an adventure. I'll tell the story now because it was one of the turning points of my life. People didn't know me that well in the States because I was doing maybe a lot of local shows in New York and some TV, but not that well known. So Steve Allen flies me out there to LA, and it's nighttime. And he's standing at the other end of a stage, because it was done in a theater setting, not a TV set. It's more of a theater setting. And he's standing on the dais, the way Letterman did, everybody else did. And he says, this young man is very gifted. He said, you probably don't know about him. So I walk out, and in those days, 60s and 70s, the lights were very blinding in broadcasting. And the moving camera, as I'm walking, had lights all around the top and the sides, and they were blinding. And like I know it all, sure, I'm looking at the camera, and I'm talking to Steve Allen, who I never met before, and saying how much I admire him. So as I'm getting closer to Steve Allen, I'm also experiencing a phenomenon called blindness where I can't see. I go to turn to Steve Allen, trip over the dais, and fall flat on my face. My family considers it the highlight of my career. So there I'm on the floor, I'm kneeling down, and the audience chuckled. But Steve Allen wasn't the mocking type comedian. He said, "You're all right, young man. It's over." And he was very kind to me. But a man was watching the show that night, and he saw the incident going across the stage, falling. And 6 or 7 or 8 weeks later, Johnny Carson created Karnak, the Magnificent.
Oh,
Karnak falling over the table was me. So
it's great. I had no idea. That's so cool. The mighty Karnak was based on you.
Kreskin, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking so much time to talk with us.
And I'm not going to say goodbye, but I'm going to say this, and I mean this sincerely, as I've said it all over the world. In the spirit of broadcasting, let's just say, to be continued.
I did a little edit there and put his actual concluding words to us at the end of that clip. There's actually a lot in between that, but I thought I would put that in because he was famous for saying, I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to just say to be continued.
And let's hope that's true. Wherever he is, I hope on some level, in some way, we get a chance to be continued as he is. What a great interview! What a great guy! And really, if you are on the David Letterman show, who was, we have talked to other magicians who appeared on that show, and Dave, just straight across the board, doesn't suffer fools.
Unless you're Jeff Altman. Jeff Altman knew how to
Jeff
handle it.
Altman, yeah. But other than that, I mean,
Right.
if it goes sideways, the last person in the world I want sitting across from me, if it goes sideways, is Letterman, because he's not going to, in any way, shape, or form, be nice to me about it. He's going to make himself look good, which is what,
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm an enormous David Letterman fan. So I'm not taking anything away from him, but kudos to Kreskin for just sort of rolling with it.
Yeah, and I think that's why Letterman loved him, was he would just go with it. As we mentioned before, he tripped on the Steve Allen show, and a couple weeks later, boom, there's Karnak, based on, based on Johnny and Johnny's writers having seen that and going, oh, that's a funny thing. A guy who trips when he comes out and is a mentalist. Anyway, I'm so glad that we got to talk to him. He is one of, I'm not going to list names here, but we have lost a couple people that we've interviewed. And I guess that's only going to happen more, because I think that's how time moves. I think it does move forward. We'll have to check with our researchers on that, but I think that's how it goes. So
Time flies like an arrow.
Yeah.
Fruit flies like a banana.
Is that a Groucho Marx?
It is a Groucho Marx. I'm in Groucho Marx mode right now. And speaking of modes, I think it's time for I Love That. And since this is an even episode, you start.
I get to start. And this is a fun one. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this before, and it was inspired by last episode. I recommended people watch Midnight Run, starring, in my mind, Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro. I think at the time it was flipped, but in my mind, it's a Charles Grodin movie. And that I've always been fascinated with Charles Grodin. He was a fascinating, interesting person. And he wrote a number of memoirs about his life in show business and his talk show. But the very first one, I believe, is the one I want to focus on here, because although it was, quote unquote, a memoir about show business, it was really his book about how do you deal with rejection, because that's what he dealt with for the first whatever in his career. For a long time, he was rejected a lot. As an actor, Jim, you understand that's kind of a daily occurrence.
Part of what you do.
Part of what you do. And he developed a mindset that allowed him to be okay with that and grow from that. The book is called It Would Be So Nice If You Weren't Here.
I've read it.
The title comes from, he was shooting a movie called 11 Harrow House with James Mason and Candice Bergen, and I think John Gielgud. And he and Candice Bergen were hanging out in a room in a large mansion they were shooting in. And the woman who owned the mansion walked in and saw them and said in the sweetest British voice, "It would be so nice if you weren't here."
Yes.
And that, he felt, was the philosophy he's been dealing with his whole life as an actor. People just very politely saying, go away,
Yeah.
go away, go
Yeah.
away. There are wonderful anecdotes in it. He's a very, very funny man, but also some life lessons about
Yeah.
how do you deal with rejection and what does rejection mean. And I mean, this is someone who starred on Broadway for a year with Ellen Burstyn in a brand new play called Same Time Next Year.
Yeah.
And when it came time to do the movie, Alan Alda got the part because
Yeah.
Alan Alda was a TV star and Charles Grodin wasn't. Charles Grodin was very close to being Benjamin Braddock in The Graduate
Oh, I did not know that.
and auditioned with Catherine Ross. And I believe in the book says the reason I didn't get it was Mike Nichols asked the two of us to jump on a bed. And I said, I need to know why you want me to jump on a bed, which is not an
I don't remember
unreasonable.
that from the book, and I read the book.
Yeah, it might not be, and that might be in another one, but, and getting a call that night from Mike Nichols saying, hey, Charles, I'm doing a movie called Catch 22. When I'm done with this, I want you to be in it. And Charles going, so I'm not in this one. No, you're not in this one. You're not in this one.
Okay.
Anyway, so I highly recommend anything Charles Grodin has.
Absolutely.
But this one is called It Would Be So Nice If You Weren't Here.
Good book. Great actor. Heaven Can Wait alone
Oh.
worth the price of admission because of Charles Grodin, and that's just a flat out great film. It's not my I love that, but it certainly could be.
Yes.
So here's my I love that.
Okay.
My brother is a professional magician, and I am his biggest fan. And he is, John, you're a close second in terms of good human beings, but my brother so far outdistances any other human being that I have ever known in terms of being
If I can
good.
just quote Mike Nichols here.
He's a saint.
Oh, what a good person he is.
No, he's a saint. He's a saint. He's
Right,
a saint. The
right.
man is a saint.
You're right, he's a saint.
He happens to be the only saint I know.
Yeah, he really is. He's just terrific, and I adore him. And so I always try to think of things that I can get him for the holidays or for his birthday that, it's a special thing. So I, this year for Christmas, got him Joshua Jay's book. Joshua Jay, on our podcast, Once Upon a Time, has a book called How Magicians Think and Why Magic Matters. And I thought, oh, this is a perfect gift for my brother for Christmas. So I ordered it. It was hard to find. I eventually found it on a thing called Amazon. I don't know if you've heard of that, but got it and gave it to him for Christmas. And we always say in my family, hey, I'm picking things for you. If it's not something you enjoy, I've got the receipt, and you're welcome to return it. And there will be no. I'm taking a guess, and if you don't like it, that's fine by me. You get what you want. So when he opened it, I said to my brother, "Hey, I thought this would be a good gift. If you don't like it, or if you own it already, let me know." And my brother said, "Do you really want me to do that?" I said, "We always do." He said, "Yeah, I actually own this. I'm reading it right now." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll return it and I'll find something else." And my brother said, Do you own it? Have you read it? And I said, "No, I don't own it, and I haven't read it." And he said, "Well, Merry Christmas." And so I have this book now that was a gift to my brother, which was then a gift from my brother, and it is terrific. It's a
Yeah.
terrific book.
It is.
Even if you're just sort of like not a magician at all, and just sort of because of this podcast now have a sort of interest in it, this is the perfect book. It's so fascinating, and he's such a good writer, and I think you'll enjoy it. That's my I love that, and really my I love that is I love my brother, and this is a great book. And you know what? My brother doesn't know this yet, but I found another book which has not come out yet, so I know he doesn't have it, by another magician that I think he's really going to enjoy. And so that will be the make good gift that he'll get as soon as that book is available.
Well, I highly recommend that book as well. I believe I have an autographed copy. He did a book tour, which landed him at the state fair for some reason during a book event. And I believe he autographed my copy of it. Very nice man. Very, very little tired at that event, but he was a very, very nice man. And
Nice.
speaking of gifts, I will throw this out there. I don't know if I've ever explained to you the Christmas gift setup we have here at the Gaspard house with Mrs. Gaspard, but I
No.
don't know if she came up with it or I came up with it, but I highly recommend it. And if there's a way for me to monetize it, I would, because
Yeah.
it is
You
everybody
and I
I've
are
told
both
it
so
to.
good at monetizing
We
things.
are. We are. Everyone I've told it to has said, that's a great idea. Here's what we do, Jim, and you might want to take this up with Mrs. Cunningham. Throughout the year, if I see something I think that I'd like for Christmas, I buy it and I give it to my wife and she hides it away. And she does the same with me. So we just have these little cubby holes where we hide these things. And given my age and the Swiss cheesiness of my brain, Christmas morning comes and there's a stack of wrapped presents. She has a nice stack. I have a nice stack. And you open it up and it's you go, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's the Lego version of the Ghostbusters car. I've always wanted this. Of course you wanted it. You bought it last February and she wrapped it up and now you're getting it. So everything you get is something you want. But in general, most of it's a surprise because I've forgotten. I forgot.
I think that's a great idea. I have started doing something similar where my kids are concerned. And so I always tell my kids, you don't give me a list, you're not getting any. And so I need a list. I have absolutely no desire, time, or inclination to walk around a mall and try to find something that I think you'll like. Wouldn't you rather get what you like? Just tell me what it is and I'll get it. And so my kids have gotten very good about making lists. And my daughter, Claire, the oldest, as she says, Dad, I'll produce Christmas. You can executive produce Christmas, which means I pay for it, which is fine. That's great. But she makes sure that the other two kids have turned in their list by the Friday after Thanksgiving. And she's got
Is there
links.
anything more Claire in the world than that?
No, I mean, she's just the greatest. They're all the greatest. My son, my daughter, my little daughter, they're all the greatest. And I can't say enough good about them. I'm so blessed by them. And but yeah, I agree with that. But so I have started then, because I do like to occasionally surprise them with stuff. So when I see something, and knowing that neither of my daughters nor my son listen to this podcast, when I see something, like I saw my son is a dog trainer. I saw this really cool wolf lamp, and he's into the saving of wolves.
Mhm.
So if you buy this little kind of Tiffany wolf's head lamp, a portion of the proceeds go to saving wolves. So I bought it, and it's just going to go up on the upper bunk of the girls' bedroom. Nobody lives with us anymore. We're empty nesters. And then I saw a music box. My mother, who loved my daughter Claire because she was the firstborn girl in our family since my sister was born in 1943. So my mom loved Claire and would rock her to sleep singing her "You Are My Sunshine." And I got a Facebook message about how I don't know how they guess what I
They
might
know.
be
They
interested
know.
in, but there was a music box that played "You Are My Sunshine," and there's a place where you can put a picture in the open music box. So I got that for my daughter Claire, and then my youngest daughter Annie is into saving the bees and making sure that the bees in it. And there was an ad for a bee necklace. And if you buy
Made
it,
from
some of
dead
them,
bees.
yes, some of the money goes to making sure bees keep pollinating things for us. So
Except for these 16 bees. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think it's time I read
Yeah,
from the
let's
don't you
go.
think?
I think
I don't
there's
know
a
how much of this actually makes the podcast. John's very good at editing. You may hear none of this, or you may have heard all of it. I
you may
won't
hear it
know
twice.
until
You
I
never
hear
know.
the podcast.
I might
Yeah,
put it in twice.
yeah. We're reading the Linking Rings. I think I'm reading chapter 4. Is that
You
right?
are. You are.
Okay,
So let me
so
tell you
tell
what
us
happened in
what
chapter 3. We'll look back on that.
would
That
you?
was the Ripper Walk, where we got to meet Henry McHugh. Even though he's retired, he's going to help out. Harry gets out of jail because of Lawrence Baxter's good barrister. They're not out of the woods, though. He's still going to be charged. Probably Harry discusses that Oscar actually took a pass that he did, stole it as his own. And Lawrence Baxter, who's kind of the sage of the group, says, you know what we really need to do is the police are only looking at Harry, and we need to get them to look at other suspects. They need to look at that chair and figure out what was going on in the chair that was designed to stab Oscar in the back when he sat on it. And then Lawrence invited everyone to stay at his estate. And that took us to the end of chapter 3. And from that, we go right into chapter 4.
Get comfortable. Chapter 4. The Heath Lawrence Baxter spoke of turned out to be Hampstead Heath, a posh suburb of London. Its exclusivity was evidenced by the numerous large houses and small mansions I noticed as we approached Baxter's home. He had insisted on driving us, so after a quick stop to our hotel to check out and pick up our bags, Harry, Megan, and I found ourselves cruising through the tree-lined lanes while Baxter provided a running commentary on the surrounding geography. Hampstead Heath is one of the highest points in London, and you'll see the proof of that to your right, just around this curve. Ever the obedient tourists, we all turned to the right as the trees parted, revealing a large green park that rolled on and on. In the distance was an amazing view of the heart of London. "This must be one of the best views of the city," Megan said as she leaned around me to get a better look out the car window. "Yes," Baxter agreed. "Of course, the London Eye provides the best view of London, primarily because it's one of the few views that doesn't include the London Eye." He laughed at his own joke. I had seen photos of the London Eye, a very tall Ferris wheel type structure. No fan of heights, I wasn't planning on getting close to, let alone inside, the London Eye anytime soon. "Didn't someone once say the same thing about the Eiffel Tower?" Harry asked from his position in the front seat. He had been strangely silent throughout the entire trip. "Perhaps," Baxter admitted, "but it applies in this instance tenfold. Ah, here we are." We turned left, and we got our first view of Lawrence Baxter's house. A 3-story mansion, complete with a turret on one high corner and what looked like a small glass greenhouse on the roof. The massive gray stone and red brick structure was situated directly across the lane from the Heath, giving the impression it was all part of the same sprawling property. "Lawrence, are you sure you got enough room for us?" Harry teased as we gazed up at the imposing structure. "Make your jokes, Marks, but this is one of those rare occasions when we are actually quite near capacity," Baxter replied. "Several of the Magi performing this week are staying with us. Boaz, Angus, Davis DeVries, Hector Hechizo, and Roy and Roxanne Templeton. Let me see, is that all of them?" He pulled the car to a stop in the portico outside the front door, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "Yes, I believe that's all of us," he finally said. "Now, let's get you 3 settled and then have some lunch." The contrast between where we had stayed the night before and where we were staying now could not have been more, contrasty. It was no exaggeration to say that you could fit 4 or 5 of our hotel rooms into the 1 bedroom Baxter brought us to, plus still have space for a handful of the hotel's elevators as well. The room and the house itself was an artful mixture of old-world elegance and modern convenience. "When I bought it," Baxter explained, as he gave us a quick tour of our new surroundings, "I have to admit it was a bit of a fixer-upper, if that's the right expression." I assured him it was. I couldn't speak for all the American tourists on Yelp, but I felt it was possible the type of high-ranking reviews this locale might generate would have caused the app to explode. "I put Harry across the hall from you," Baxter said, taking several long strides from the center of the bedroom to the doorway. He gestured down the long, tastefully decorated corridor. All the other magicians are on this floor. I was tempted to put Boris up on 3, he said with a devilish grin. You know, keep the mentalists at a bit of a distance, little outside of the club and all that. But my better angels prevailed. And speaking of the 3rd floor, he continued, turning me toward the staircase at the end of the hall, we've got a pretty decent workout room upstairs. You know the drill, some ellipticals, bicycles, free weights, that sort of thing. And if you like flowers, my dear, Baxter said, turning to Megan, you should take a look at the greenhouse on the roof. Not dazzling this time of year, I'm afraid, but there are some lovely specimens. A greenhouse, Megan said happily. I love greenhouses. And that was all it took to inspire a continuation of the guided tour, this time to visit the greenhouse, which was up a flight to the 3rd floor and then up a spiral staircase and out an aged wooden door that deposited us on the roof. Once we were out in the air, Megan headed to the small greenhouse and immediately started oohing and eyeing over either the flora or the fauna, whichever one applied in this situation. Baxter marched forward to the edge of the roof and gestured to the majestic view of the heath in the near distance and an equally impressive view of London on the far horizon. This is why I bought this place, he said with pride, then turned to me and motioned I should join him near the edge. Come enjoy this magnificent view. It looks great from back here, I said, sticking close to the door and the stairway. I had found one of the best ways to confront my fear of heights was to stay away from them. While many other treatments had been employed, both traditional and arcane, no other method had proved to be as effective as simple avoidance. No fan of heights, I see, Baxter said. Guilty as charged, I agreed, but it is an amazing view. You should see it during the New Year's Eve fireworks display. Dazzling from this vantage point. Looks like the Blitz all over again. I nodded in agreement, although I wasn't entirely clear why any Londoner would want to recreate the Blitz. I looked down, surprised to see I was standing on a grass lawn, which covered most of the roof. Baxter noticed and walked over to me. It's not really grass, he said quietly, sounding a little disappointed at the admission. I tried, Lord knows I tried, but the drainage issues up here were, to put it lightly, insurmountable. I looked down at my feet. I don't know, I said. Looks pretty real to me. Thank you, but it would never pass close inspection, he said, rather sadly. I tried to imagine a reason why such an inspection would be required, but couldn't think of one. Anyway, it looks nice, I finally said. Yes, I do like it. They lay it just like sod, in long strips. Remarkable, really, he said. All right, enough of the tour, he said suddenly, clapping his hands together. Let's eat. Lunch was nearly as impressive as the house itself. A typical lunch for me at home usually consisted of simply standing in front of the open refrigerator, grazing on whichever foodstuff seemed like they hadn't gone bad yet. That was a far cry from the spread Lawrence Baxter set out for his guests, and it included the ritzy novelty of servants bringing in food and carrying away plates. Once Harry, Megan, and I were seated, we were reintroduced to Angus, Bishop, and Boris, 2 magicians we had met briefly backstage at the Magic Circle. Although Baxter had rattled off a long list of names when we arrived, only one other magician joined us for lunch. He introduced himself as Hector, a large and jovial man from Spain, whose English was far superior to my Spanish. He seemed to find everything I said both fascinating and hilarious. I liked him immediately. As we all got down to the serious business of eating an amazing lunch, Harry inquired as to the whereabouts of the other house guests. Dr. and Dr. Templeton went into the city for even more shopping, God love 'em, Angus said between large bites from a sandwich that would have made Dagwood Bumstead proud. But I'm not sure what happened to Dr. De Vries, he added, wiping at a glob of mayonnaise that had missed his mouth and landed on his cheek. He licked the finger clean and continued to work on the sandwich. Dr. De Vries went back down to the magic circle, Boris said in his deep, somber voice. Both magicians had been adding the moniker Doctor to the names, in keeping with the way all the Magi addressed each other, with the exception of the one actual doctor in the group, Lawrence Baxter. Boris was an amazingly still and focused man who looked far younger than his years, given he was a contemporary of the other Magi. Like many mentalists, he cultivated a spooky quality which he maintained in full force even while off stage. His accent was hard to pin down, but I suspected it was some form of Slavic. His shipping cases with the Catherine wheel arrived, Boris added. Ah, yes, the legendary Catherine wheel, Uncle Harry said as he took another bite of the egg white omelet the kitchen staff had prepared for him. Let me ask you this. Since he's arrived, how many times has he casually mentioned the whole enterprise packs into 2 cases and can be assembled by one man using no tools whatsoever? Angus and Boris exchanged a quick look. 3 times just this morning, Boris said. Angus was still chewing, but he shook his head. 4? Boris ventured. Angus nodded. He's proud of that fact, is he? I asked. Imminently, Lawrence Baxter said before Harry could respond. He hardly ever talks about the illusions of fact, just goes on and on about how easy it is to transport, as if conveyance were the primary concern behind a magic trick. Angus shrugged. You forget, mate. That's important to a lot of us poor working stiffs. Not every magician has a fleet of semi-trucks carting our shows about with peons and minions to set up and tear down for us. He gave a sidelong glance at Baxter to make sure his jab had landed. Baxter pursed his lips at him, confirming it had. Once the airline lost all my luggage, Boris said in his deep voice, which seemed much too large for his small frame, and I was able to procure everything I needed to perform a dazzling show from a stationery shop for under $10 American. You magicians. You're all about the silly big boxes. Hector laughed and held up a deck of cards. Not me, my friend, not me. All I need is this and these. He wiggled his fingers at the rest of us in a manner that was somehow both charming and just a little bit obscene. I can take one deck of cards and make it play for 90 minutes. I glanced over at Megan and noticed she wasn't eating, just looking at the group and smiling. Is everything okay? I asked. This reminds me of home, she said, sitting around with you and Harry and the Mystics at the bar. The accents are different, but the sentiments feel about the same. She patted Harry's hand, and he smiled warmly for the first time all day. It's a good feeling. Yes, it is, I agreed, and turned to ask Hector a question about the make and model of the cards he was holding. And then I froze. Standing by the door to the kitchen, icy and still, was the creepy old woman from the magic circle. She had entered quietly and stood staring at us with a look on her face that might have been utter contempt or complete indifference. Either way, it was unnerving. Baxter noticed the expression on my face and must have recognized its cause. Yes, Miss Hess, he said without turning to acknowledge her. Do we know how many to expect for dinner? She said in her clipped German accent. Preparations must begin. Baxter looked around the table. What do you say, gents? You've made it through lunch? Want to give dinner a go? General assent all around. Then Megan touched my elbow. We have those theater tickets tonight, Eli. Do you think we should eat in town before the show? I'd completely forgotten about the tickets. Yes, that's a good idea, I agreed, and then turned to Harry. Harry, do you want to join us? It's the show I told you about, the one with my friend from high school, Jake North. I don't have much experience dropping names, but I must have just dropped a big one if the reaction from around the table was any indication. Jake North, you say? Baxter said in a tone that was hard to read. The looks on Angus's and Boris's faces also suggested surprise at the mention of the name. "You guys know Jake and his sitcom?" I asked. "That bloody sitcom," Angus mumbled. "You know, when I talk to Americans, they're always so impressed by the Brit shows of ours they've seen. They think all we produce are shows like Downton Abbey, Sherlock, Doctor Who, and The Office, because we're polite enough not to send you our rubbish. The least you colonies could do is return the favor. And make no mistake, blind man's bluff is rubbish," Boris said. "I have only seen it dubbed into Spanish, but see, I would have to concur," Hector nodded. "Es basura. It's bad enough we're subjected to that tripe, but now the bloke keeps popping up on every chat show on every channel," Angus said between bites of a rich-looking apple cobbler. "Gotten to the point you can't turn on the telly without seeing that silly get doing his lame tricks. Celebrity prats doing magic, God help us." "Celebrities doing magic," Boris said, spitting out the words. "The worst. Just the worst." "Lo peor," Hector agreed. "Justo lo peor." I didn't need more than my high school understanding of Spanish to determine celebrities doing magic on talk shows was a sore subject among this group. "Well, regardless, the whole thing strikes me as a bit deceptive," Baxter said, "given I'm led to understand the play he's in doesn't even feature any magic." "I guess not. I understand it's a comedy mystery," I said. "Jake got into magic when he did the movie about the life and death of Terry Alexander." The mention of that film steered the table away from the discussion of celebrities doing magic into an intense discussion of the bullet catch and the impossibility of effectively presenting magic in movies. Since I had helped with the presentation in that particular movie, I decided not to join in on the conversation. Thankfully, Harry pulled us back on track. "It's a comedy, you say? Jake's play?" Harry said, steering the discussion back to our plans for the evening. "That might be just the thing. If the invitation still stands, I would love to join you." "This will be fun," Megan said, and Harry beamed at her. "Terrific," I said. "Anyone else up for it?" Polite refusals all around. No one even bothered to come up with an excuse, which I took as a continued indictment of Jake and his magic-heavy TV appearances. "Now, if you'll all pardon me," Harry said, "I think I'll go lay down for a bit in my ongoing attempt to reset my internal and infernal clock." With that, he pushed himself back from the table, nodded to Lawrence Baxter, and headed toward the large dining room's entryway. "Remember which room is yours?" Baxter called to him. "Not a problem. I left breadcrumbs," came Harry's reply from the hall. That produced smiles all around. Baxter turned to me. "He's holding up nicely, don't you think?" he asked quietly. "I mean, given the events of the last few days." I was about to agree he was when Angus chimed in. "If I was him," Angus said, matching Baxter's low volume, "the thing that would bother me the most is remembering he and Oscar flipped a coin to decide who would sit in that bloody chair." "So he must be thinking it could have been him," Boris said. Angus shook his head. "That would be my first thought, Doctor," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "My second thought would be, if the knife was meant for me, and they missed me the first time." He let the words hang in the air, and then breathlessly finished the thought. "When might they try again?"
Another attempt on Harry's life?
Well, there could be. There could be. That's what Angus is saying. If
Well-
they were actually trying to kill Harry, are they going to try it again? And that's sort of the question, because he and Oscar switched places, and Harry was going to sit in that chair, and Oscar ended up doing it, and that's why he died. So there's that question. There's also, now we're finding out that Jake North is in town, and he's doing a play called A Pretty Taste for Paradox, which I think is a great name for a play. In this case, taken from the
Pirates, isn't it? Pirates of
Pirates of
Penzance?
Penzance, yeah, the general song. I've got a pretty taste for paradox.
I know I'm mythic history, King Arthur's answer paradox. I answer hard acrostics, I've a pretty taste for paradox. I quote in elegiacs all the crimes of Heliogabalus, in comics I control peculiarities and analysis. I can tell undoubted Raphael, some Gerard Dawson's Ophanes. I know the croaking calls from the frogs of Aristophanes. Then I can hum a fugue of which I've heard the music dinner for. Ooh, dinner for. Got it. And whistle all the airs from that infernal nonsense pinafore!
And we're gonna learn more about that play and about Jake North in that play. What he goes through is based on an experience I had where I went to see a mystery Sherlock Holmes play that was not written by anybody we know, and I believe it was the last performance of the show. But that doesn't give them the right to do what they did. One of the actors kind of went off and started ad-libbing stuff in a play about clues. You know, you as an audience member are trying to solve this, and he started making stuff up, which I realized eventually he was just making references to the game Clue, where he would say, well, didn't there used to be a secret passageway here? And wasn't there a knife there? And get to the end of the play and go, well, the solution didn't make any, and what was he talking? And talked to the director, and the director said, yeah, apparently he just made that stuff up today. And I thought, boy, if it weren't the last show, it would be your last show.
Yeah. Whoever that is, I don't want to work with him.
No, if this is a mystery play, there's an audience trying to solve a mystery. You can't just make stuff up. Well, that's what we're going to find out happens with poor Jake North in the play that he is in as we get further and further into A Pretty Taste for Paradox. And if someone does write a mystery play called A Pretty Taste for Paradox, at least give me a little credit for
Absolutely.
being a pretty.
Let him wet his beak.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll find out more about all that later on. And speaking of later on, our next episode, it's funny you mentioned Joshua J. We're going to be talking to Damian Jennings. Damian Jennings is a magician. He's a podcaster, a marketer. He works for and with Joshua. So it's sort of a coincidence that you mentioned him. He is the chief marketing officer at Vanishing Inc. He is the host of a terrific podcast called The Insider. He also has created a magician mind-reading character called Tony Sagittarius, the world's sexiest mind reader.
Yes, it's me! Tony Sagittarius, yes, the Tony Sagittarius. Wooer of women. Toucher of totty. Chatter up of chicks. I am here this evening to sell you the incredible Tony Sagittarius Seduction System, TSSS.
That's what we're going to talk to next, and we're also going to listen to Chapter 5 of The Linking Rings.
I can hardly wait.
If you're not subscribing, subscribe. Hit the like button and see us next time. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
This has been Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham. Produced by Albertsbridge Books at Grass Lake Studios. Find this podcast and all the books in the Eli Marks series at elimarksmysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS mysteries.com. And thanks for listening.